This is an arrangement. I did it here, I think, last month for the couple of you who might have heard it. It's a little different arrangement. I like the song. I'm still working on how it might be arranged. It's based upon a William Blake quote I came upon in a novel that I read about a month ago. And it's kind of a simple saying, but it struck me as many of Blake's poetry lines as being fairly profound. It goes, "Great things are done when men and mountains meet." And then the second line is equally profound in its own way. And then I finished the song with a line that's sort of been attributed to Robert W. Service, the poet laureate of Alaska, but I'm not sure he ever said it. I think there's some confusion historically there. But anyway, I borrowed on each end of this thing, and then really I was trying to puzzle out what was William Blake thinking about in late 18th century industrialized London when he was talking about men and mountains. What did he know about that, and what did he really maybe mean? Who knows, but this is my exploration of the question. And I'm going to borrow Rod's "Singing Out of My Range" a la Alex Chilton in the Big Star era. Who cares if I can't hit the notes? Great things are done when men and mountains meet. This is not done by jostling in the street. That's what William Blake observed as his eternal muse was served. That great things are done when men and mountains meet. There are precious few mountains you can see from London town. The Thames cuts through the center of the level ground. So what do you think he meant when he said that momentous things would come to a head, and that great things would come when men and mountains meet? Maybe your highest mountain is found where the ship of your ambition has again run aground, or in the gathering of the enemy army in the valley below. Maybe your mountain could be the fear you never could face, that thing that always served to scratch you from the race as you feel the underutilized potential inside of you grow. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Sha la 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 la. Do 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 da 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 da. Do 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 do. Pull out your climbing gear and engage that daunting peak. The gauntlet's been thrown, the challenge is what you seek. Your time is now, there's no need to wait. Life slips through your fingers while you hesitate, because great things are done when men and mountains meet. Yes, great things are done when men and mountains meet. It's not the mountain ahead that wears you down. It's the grain of sand in your shoe that you haul around. Thank you.
I appreciate everybody's songs. Thank you. Made me feel good. I realize the point of this is to come with a prepared song, like a completed song. That is the optimal scenario. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Good.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what this is. I hope to turn this into an actual song eventually. I spend a lot of time reading about the history. I spend a lot of time reading about things I shouldn't be reading about, in lieu of things I should be reading about. And the former of those is American history and the settlement of the American West and the exploration of the American West in particular. And you can easily spend a lot of time doing this because there is a lot to read, which I realize, and I'm sort of scatterbrained about it, and I jump from one thing to another. But I like it. I love it. I've been all over the West. I spent a lot of time out West, California in particular. And you read some amazing stuff. I mean, really amazing. Totally. It's some of the coolest stuff I've ever read. It's stuff that we don't know about. What they went through, different explorations. A lot of the stuff I'm reading about is sort of mid 1800s, 1850s, 1840s and 50s. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. In the first half of the 1850s, the first 5 years of the 1850s, there was a whole series of railroad surveys that were done, and these were major operations, and there was a whole bunch of them. And they were trying to figure out the best route for a transcontinental railroad. And before those started, there was John Fremont, J.C. Fremont, did some of the first really, other than Lewis and Clark, did really some of the first really like across the entire West, like from St. Louis all the way to the Pacific coast, and he did this several times in the 1840s and early 1850s. And his fourth expedition, he had 5 expeditions, and his fourth one was in 1848-49, and he had a botanist on this expedition, which later in the 1850s, these railroad surveys typically had like a geologist, a botanist, a paleontologist. And this guy's name was Friedrich Creutzfeldt, was the botanist. Fremont, if you don't know much about him, he's an interesting dude, interesting character in a lot of ways. But he damn near wiped out his fourth expedition in the mountains of Colorado in the winter of 1848-1849. Total fiasco. Brutal to read about. And I'm pretty familiar with the brutal. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the Truckee area. I know all about the Donner Party and all that stuff. Anyway, this guy's name was Friedrich Creutzfeldt, and he survived. He was not one of the 13 guys that died of hypothermia or starvation, but he came damn close. And that was 1848-49. And then I know you didn't come for a lecture, but like I said, I have a half-finished song. Okay. And Creutzfeldt survived, barely. I mean, barely. He came within probably a matter of minutes of death. And he survived. And 4 years later, he was on one of the railroad surveys in 1853, which was led by a man named John Gunnison, Lieutenant John Gunnison, after whom the Gunnison River and Gunnison, Colorado are named. And Gunnison's survey party, when they were out in the southwestern desert of Utah, these guys actually went across the same route that Fremont did, and poor Creutzfeldt had to sort of relive the same locations that he almost died in and that a bunch of his friends died in. And they got out into the Sevier Lake area of southwestern Utah, and they were ambushed at sunrise by a band of Paiute Indians who killed about half of them, including Gunnison and Creutzfeldt and another guy named Richard Kern, one of the three Kern brothers, after whom the Kern River and Kernville, California are named. So I started doing some research trying to figure out who this Creutzfeldt was, because I'm a plant biologist, I'm a botanist, forest ecologist. And there was hardly anything I could find about this guy, except that he was from St. Louis, and he probably knew this guy named Charles Preuss, who was a German topographer who was one of Fremont's sort of right-hand man on his expeditions. But that was about all I could find. So I get really interested in stuff like that. And this guy apparently, Creutzfeldt apparently, when the Gunnison survey was in Colorado before they were going west, he was probably, as far as I can tell, he was probably the first one to actually collect Rocky Mountain bristlecone pine in the high mountains near Cochetopa Pass, which is in south central Colorado in the San Juan Mountains. And he got no credit for that. He has one plant name. It's common, Fremont has a whole bunch of plants. Fremont was actually a botanist. He has a whole bunch of plants named after him. It's common for explorers to have plants named after them. And poor Creutzfeldt had only one plant named after him, and that didn't happen until a botanist in Utah in 1982 realized this and named one of a new species that he had discovered in the late 70s after Creutzfeldt. It's a whole new concept in songwriting. You give all the words first, and then you give the music. It's just way easier. Way easier. Rocky Mountain bristlecone pine is a different species than Great Basin bristlecone pine, just for those of you who are botanically inclined. Bristlecone pines are the oldest trees in the world, but those really old ones are Great Basin bristlecone pines, and they grow mostly across Nevada, on the high peaks across Nevada and far eastern California. But still, those two species are closely related, and it looks to me, and I'm not the first one to notice that. Somebody else mentioned that in the book I was reading, and so I went and tracked it down, looked at his description of, I can't remember the details, but I looked at his description, and I'm pretty sure that Creutzfeldt did collect the first specimen. He didn't name it. It was later named by some other guy. I won't go into botanical nomenclature. Maybe I should. No, Jim wrote a song about Roger Angell. Yes. A letter to Roger Angell. Then I figure I can write a botanical nomenclature. I mean. Thank you. Thank
That
you.
was really cool, and I'm
Okay.
pleased to be part of the birth of a new kind of song.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got that on tape. I got it on tape. And it's a song I wrote, and it was inspired by a geographical entity that runs right through our county. It's called the Huron River. And if any of you are native Ann Arborites or whatever, you realize how important this river is to us, as to many of the towns that are around it. Anyway, I take photography, and I was out in the wintertime near the river, and this melody line of the chorus just sort of popped in my head. So something out there was speaking to me. Maybe it was the river, I'm not sure, but I wrote this. It's called Along the Banks of the Huron, and it's a cultural, historical, and environmental tale of the Huron River. Long before the white man traveled up her winding stream, the tribes called the trade route Coscoot in Nong Sabee, where deer, fox, and beaver lived in nature's harmony, with Wyandotte, Ojibwa, and the Potawatomi. When French explorer and fur trader De La Salle was lost, the southern Michigan bogs were their great challenge to cross. But they found a tangled river, took them to Lake Erie's blue. Like tribesmen, they built and paddled birch bark canoes along the banks of the beautiful Huron. You'll give thanks for the river that you're on. You can walk many trails, in a canoe you will sail along the banks of the dreamy Huron. The decades grew in turmoil for the Huron Valley tribes. With guns and greed and strange disease, white settlers arrived. And men like Rumsey Allen and Woodruff were glory bound. The blocks of today's cities were built on sacred ground. As the tanneries and lumber mills and factories grew forth, the tribes saw the storm ahead and moved away up north. But civilization followed and took all at such a cost. By the 1960s, the Huron was all but lost. Along the banks of the beautiful Huron, you'll give thanks for the river that you're on. You can walk too many trails, in a kayak you will sail along the banks of the dreamy Huron. Today's clean water activism helps keep her from ruin, but there lies a growing threat beneath our homes and schools. When Honey Creek was poisoned by the devil Gelman fools, we still battled state courts over the dioxin plume. But the river's invitation gathers family and friends, picnics, games, or watching ducks swim around the bend. The summer streams of kayaks and canoes go floating by. From them or on the shore, hands are raised to say hi. Along the banks of the beautiful Huron, you'll give thanks for the river that you're on. You can walk many trails, in a canoe you will sail along the banks of the dreamy Huron. Along the banks of the beautiful Huron. Beautiful Huron. Thank you.